The US passed an aid package to Taiwan and might be sanctioning China. TikTok might be dead, and floods are devastating Guangdong province. And more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Let's start off with something light. Biblical flooding. Massive floods are threatening tens of millions of people in southern China's Guangdong province as intense rains batter the area. Emergency response plans are underway to protect the 127 million people who live in the province. Let's just hope that this time they use those emergency response plans to actually protect the people instead of just diverting floodwaters into cities the CCP felt were less important, like last time. There has been damage to power plants in Zhaoqing. Unfortunately, those power plants were made in China. And the local government reports that over 110,000 Chinese citizens have required evacuation as of Wednesday morning. According to Xinhua News, so far 4 people have died, including a rescue worker, and 10 more remain missing. Floods are typical this time of year, but these have been historic, with rains coming earlier than usual. Chinese state media is blaming climate change, which is totally not a convenient cover for any of the CCP's infrastructure failures. Meanwhile, as usual, Beijing is angry. This time their ire is directed at the United States for daring to claim that China is fueling the Ukraine war, because the CCP would never do such a thing. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbing said the U.S. is making groundless accusations against normal trade between China and Russia. Normal trade, of course, includes staggering amounts of dual-use items like machine tools, drone and turbojet engines, and microelectronics. China insists that it subjects dual-use items, things that can be used for military and civilian purposes, to consistent regulations, and we know all about how thorough Chinese regulations are. And it's been a long time coming, but the U.S. is finally forcing China to divest ownership of TikTok. President Biden signed it into law this week after it passed Congress. The new legislation is giving ByteDance about a year to divest from the app or risk losing its biggest customer base, Gen Z Americans with way too much time on their hands. Beijing is very upset about this because it means losing one of its most powerful propaganda tools targeting American youth, such as this piece of absolute cinematic art where a Chinese man under threat from locals in a foreign country flashes his Chinese passport like a magical talisman, and they immediately bow and walk away. And here I thought China was supposed to be friendlier to the global south and the Western imperialist colonialist powers who use racist propaganda. Strange. That TikTok bill also included $95 billion in aid for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. The package specifically includes $8 billion for Taiwan and nearby nations to contain the CCP and deter it from attacking. This has been a bad week for the CCP, and a good week for me. But the bad news for the CCP doesn't stop yet. Congress also passed a milestone data privacy bill that was unfortunately overshadowed by the TikTok bill. This bill might be even more important than the potential ban on TikTok, since it targets data privacy invasion and theft on a broader level, aiming to prevent foreign adversaries from stealing personal and private information from U.S. citizens. The bill prevents data brokers from selling such information to countries like Russia and China, and even garnered support from some progressive lawmakers who opposed the TikTok bill. I joke a lot about Congress not doing anything, but it seems like they're actually doing something. Now I'm worried. And after the break, is the U.S. finally sanctioning China for its support of Russia? Welcome back. The UK and Germany have both arrested people accused of spying for the CCP. The UK spy includes a parliamentary researcher, while German prosecutors say the suspects were arrested for spying on behalf of the Chinese Ministry for State Security and collecting sensitive information including designs for an engine suitable for use on combat ships to pass on to China. They also are accused of exporting a laser to China, which is banned under the EU's dual-use regulations. I wonder if those dual-use regulations apply to so-called normal trade between Russia and China. Because speaking of that, the U.S. is poised to sanction Chinese banks that are aiding the Russian war effort in Ukraine. The idea is to sever these banks from the global financial system in order to stop further support. The White House is also sanctioning Chinese and Belarusian firms for supporting Pakistan's missile program. But if anyone can smooth over U.S.-China tensions, it's U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He's visiting China. On the list of topics to be discussed are Chinese dumping of cheap goods on the global market, Beijing's regional aggression, and its support for Russia's war on Ukraine. Which sounds strangely similar to the docket for Janet Yellen's visit earlier this month, which itself followed over a decade of talks on similar subjects. Surely this time it'll work. But according to the Japan Times, Secretary Blinken is also likely to privately offer Chinese officials a heads up that President Joe Biden could adopt a tougher stance on China as the U.S. presidential race heats up, reflecting the current domestic political climate. In other words, he's saying, just be patient. We gotta be tough during the election year, but once that's done, we'll go back to being soft. Iran's failed attack on Israel may have caused China to reconsider its plan for invading Taiwan. They haven't given it up, they're just re-strategizing. Specifically, how Americans and their allies have the technology to significantly blunt an attack. China has been ramping up the pressure on Taiwan, opening new air routes close to Taiwan. The idea being getting more and more planes in the air near Taiwan to hide a military incursion. Beijing wants to redefine the status quo as the new Taiwanese president takes office, in light of China's utter failure to influence Taiwanese elections. Because unlike the US, Taiwan's attitude toward China won't change after an election is over. And now it's time for me to answer a question from a member of the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army, the fans who support the show on the crowdfunding website patreon.com/China Uncensored. And today's question comes from Ringleader. Chris, love the game channel. My question is, since the Uyghurs are part of the Muslim faith, why hasn't the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, or ISIS done anything to help them since they're being oppressed by a corrupt foreign power? Awesome, Ringleader. I'm glad you like my new gaming channel. I actually have a new video about China that I want to show you from that channel in just a minute. But yes, it's crazy that with all the persecution of Muslims by the CCP, Muslim-majority countries are largely silent. Why would the Taliban ignore what China is doing? Or Iran? Or Saudi Arabia? I think you get the idea. Which should tell you something. These groups aren't actually motivated by religion. They're motivated by power and money. Thanks for your question and your support, Ringleader. And here's that video I want to show you from my new gaming channel, where I recreate communist China in the game Dwarf Fortress. Click here to see it and let me know what you think. And as always, click on that orange button to support China Uncensored on Patreon. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.